This lecture is all about LO5, which includes the converse, the inverse, and contrapositives. Don't forget to put your name, your period, and this lecture was done on Wednesday the 15th of August or Thursday the 16th of August. Now, all of these statements are considered conditional statements, which if you don't remember, that's an if-then statement, okay? Starting with the original, all right, you should have already learned what an original if-then statement is, right? A, arrow, B. If A, then B. Okay, the first one we're going to really talk about is the converse. Now, the converse is when you switch the statements. So instead of A, arrow, B, it becomes B, arrow, A, which is saying if B, then A. You just switch them, okay? There's two ways to think about this. You can think about it like a conversation, right? You're switching who's talking, right? You're conversing with someone, right? You talk and then they talk and then you talk and then they talk. Or a lot of people tend to think about the converse shoes. So if you're wearing shoes that are uncomfortable, like heels or fancy shoes, then you go home and you take them off and you switch them for your converse, okay? Now, I'm going to be doing this example at the same time while I go over these, so you can really see how they change. Now, in order to sort of save us some time, all right, I'm going to take out this part of the sentence, just to make it a little bit shorter, okay? So, the original is, if mammals feed their young milk, then whales are mammals. A, B. If A, then B. So before you do any switching, you need to know which statement is A and which statement is B. So I'm going to use some colors. Statement A is always the statement connected to the if. Okay? Now notice I didn't highlight the if. It doesn't include the if. It's just the statement that kind of is with the if. In fact, A is first, so it's the first statement. Statement B, okay, is therefore the second statement, the statement connected to the then. So now that we know which statement is which, we can actually switch them. So the converse, right, is B to A, okay? So it changes to if. Notice that the word if is still first. If whales are mammals, then, still has the then, mammals feed their young milk. So let's use our colors. A is now the second statement, and B is the first statement. Now you might think that this sounds kind of weird, because now it seems like sort of the noun of the sentence is whales. If whales are mammals, then mammals feed their young milk. But that's okay, because you're not in charge of making it true. You're in charge of just switching it. So be careful with that, because you don't want to change it so that it has a different meaning, right? If you change this to whales, now you've changed what the second statement is about. So you don't need to change big words like that. You just need to switch them, okay? The inverse now, okay? So that's the converse. The inverse is something that you should be familiar with. The inverse of addition is subtraction. The inverse of multiplication is division, right? Inverse is referring to the opposite, right? The way I think about the inverse is like a negation, which is something we also talked about, right? The inverse essentially is when you negate both statements. So it becomes not A, then not B, right? If not A, then not B. You need to negate both statements. All right, so for example, the inverse, remember it becomes not A, not B. Okay? You still have the if first, but you keep the same order as the original. So the A statement should still be first, but this time it will say if mammals do not feed their young milk, then whales are not mammals. So notice that I added in this so that it negates it, right? It gives it the opposite meaning, which makes it like giant opposite or the inverse. So I'm going to use two different colors this time because now they're different statements, right? They're the opposite. So the opposite of A, right, is not A. So that one is mammals do not feed their young milk. And the opposite of B is not B. Whales are not mammals. Okay? So that's the inverse. It has the same order, but with the negation, right? The opposite meaning. Now, the contrapositive is sort of the converse and the inverse is baby, right? So the contrapositive is the inverse switched, or the converse negated. So it's not B, then not A. See how I switched the inverse? Or I took the converse and I added the not. So if not B, then not A. So you need to switch and negate both. You have to do both the converse and the inverse to the original. So the contrapositive is not B, then not A. So it becomes if whales are not mammals, then mammals do not feed their young milk. So using my colors, not B was green, whales are not mammals, and not A is beak. Whales do not feed their young. So those are all the different versions of a conditional statement. Oh my God.